This is my student support system. Keep watching, keep learning.
Hello, welcome to my student support system. In today's class, we will discuss the second lecture of nervous system. This lecture is in English, and if you want to study in Hindi, just click on I button and you will get link of Hindi lecture. In today's class, we are going to discuss the brain and cranial nerves. Brain is the part of central nervous system. Brain maintains homeostasis by receiving sensory input, integrating new and stored information, making decisions, and causing motor activities. We will organize the study of brain as covering of the brain, parts of the brain, CSF, and cranial nerves. First of all, covering of the brain. Our brain is completely surrounded by a membrane, and that membrane is of three layers. This is known as meninges. These layers are found between the brain and the skull. These three layers are dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. First of all, dura mater. So dura mater is the outermost layer, which is a double layered tough fibrous connective tissue. So this dura mater itself have two layers. One is periosteal layer, which is towards the skull, and one is meningeal layer, which is towards the brain. Okay, so these two layers are there of dura mater. There are three extensions of dura mater which goes inside the brain, and it separates the parts of the brain. First extension which goes inside it, falx cerebri, which separates the two hemispheres of the brain, of the cerebrum. The falx cerebelli, which separates two hemispheres of the cerebellum, and tentorium cerebelli separates the cerebrum from the cerebellum. Here you can understand that these are three extensions of dura mater. These are two layers, one this and one this. So this inner layer goes inside. This is one falx cerebri. These are tentorium cerebelli, and this is falx cerebelli. Second layer or middle layer is arachnoid mater. This layer is of fibrous tissue that lies between the dura and pia maters. It is separated from the dura mater by a space known as subdural space, and from pia mater by subarachnoid space. The arachnoid mater passes over the convolutions of the cerebrum or brain and accompanies the inner layer of dura mater in the formation of falx cerebri, tentorium cerebelli, and falx cerebelli. We can understand this scenario in with the help of this picture. So this is one layer of dura mater, and this is second layer of dura mater, and this is the arachnoid mater, and the white space is subdural space, and this space is subarachnoid space. Pia mater. This is a delicate layer of connective tissue containing many minute blood vessels. It adheres to the brain and completely covering the convolutions and dipping or fissures of the brain. Here you can understand that this red line is pia mater, which also goes into the fissures. Okay, while dura mater and arachnoid mater, they will not enter into the fissures. So each fissure is accompanied by only pyometer. Now we come to parts of the brain. Brain has main four parts: cerebrum, cerebellum, diencephalon, and brain stem. Now we will discuss them one by one. First is cerebrum. This is the largest part of the brain. It is anterior and upper part of the brain. It is divided by a deep cleft known as longitudinal cerebral fissure into two hemispheres, right hemisphere and left hemisphere. The cerebral cortex, which is outermost portion of the brain, shows many infoldings or furrows of varying depth. So the exposed areas of the folds are known as gyrus or gyri, and the fissures are known as sulcus or sulci. These convolutions greatly increase the surface area of cerebrum. Here you can understand that this is the cerebrum. Okay, this is the largest portion of the brain and it has these convolutions. This is gyrus and these are sulcus. Okay, and this is divided into two hemispheres, left and right. Each cerebral hemisphere can be further subdivided into lobes. Okay, so right hemisphere also have four lobes and left hemisphere also have four lobes. The lobes are named after the bones that cover them. So what are those lobes? Frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe and temporal lobe. The superficial part or peripheral part of the cerebrum is composed of nerve cell bodies and which is also known as grey matter, forming the cerebral cortex. Within the cerebrum, the lobes are connected by masses of nerve fibers and these are known as tracts. These are white in color, so they are known as white matter of the brain. These tracts are association tracts, commissural tracts, and projection tracts. Association tracts contain axons that conduct nerve impulse between the gyri of same hemisphere. And commissural tracts, they contain axons that conduct nerve impulse from gyrus of one cerebral hemisphere to the corresponding gyrus of another cerebral hemisphere. Three important group of commissural tracts are corpus callosum, anterior commissure and posterior commissure. Third is projection tract, which contains axons that conduct nerve impulse from the cerebrum to the lower parts like thalamus, brainstem and spinal cord and from lower parts to the cerebrum. And example is internal capsule. Here you can see this is the gray matter and this is the white matter and these are also known as tracts. So these are association fibers or association tracts. These are commissural tracts and the best example is corpus callosum. This is the corpus callosum and these are the internal capsules. Okay, this one. Now basal ganglia. Deep within each hemisphere, there are three nuclei or masses of gray matter within the white matter. These are known as basal ganglia. They act as relay stations with connections to many parts of the brain, including motor areas of the cerebral cortex and thalamus. Their function include initiation and fine control of complex movement and learned coordinated activities such as posture and walking. Limbic system. Limbic system is a group of structures which encircles the upper part of brainstem. and corpus callosum. The limbic system is also called as emotional brain because it plays a primary role in a range of emotions, including pleasure, pain, docility, affection, fear, and anger. It, it also involved in the olfaction and memory. Now, areas of cerebrum. There are many areas in the cerebrum which are associated with one or more functions. The main functional areas of the cerebrum cortex are sensory areas, motor areas, and association areas. Sensory area. Sensory area means which receive the sensation from all parts of the body. The sensory areas include somatosensory area, auditory area, olfactory area, and visual area. The motor area means the area from where the sensation goes towards the whole body, giving instructions. The motor areas includes the primary motor areas which lies in the frontal lobe. There are two neurons involved in the pathway of skeletal system known as two neuron system. The first is known as upper motor neuron, descends from the motor cortex through the internal capsule to the medulla oblongata, and here it crosses to the opposite side and then descend to the spinal cord. At appropriate level in the spinal cord, it synapses with the second neuron, that is lower motor neuron. The lower motor neuron leaves the spinal cord and travel to the target muscle. Okay, for example, muscle of the hand or muscle of the leg. And it terminates at the motor end plate of the muscle fiber. The crossing of neurons means the motor area of right hemisphere of the cerebrum controls voluntary muscle movement of the left side of the body and vice versa. Damage to either of these neurons, upper or lower, may result in the paralysis. Broca's motor speech area. This is situated in the frontal lobe just above the lateral sulcus and controls the muscle movement needed for speech. Then third one is association areas. These are connected to each other and other areas of cerebral cortex by association tracts. They receive, coordinate and interpret impulses from the sensory and motor cortices, permitting higher cognitive abilities such as learning and memory, perception and language, planning and higher order concept formation. Next part is cerebellum. The cerebellum lies below the posterior portion of the cerebrum. It is ovoid in the shape and has two hemispheres. The superficial layer of the cerebellum, which is also called as cerebellar cortex, consists of gray matter in a series of slender parallel folds, and these folds are called as folia. Deep to gray matter, there are tracts of white matter called arbor vitae or tree of life that resembles the branches of a tree. You can see this picture. This is cerebellum. Okay, this is cerebrum, and below this there is cerebellum, which is like this. This is cortex, and this is the arbor vitae. The cerebellum is concerned with coordination of voluntary muscles, posture, and balance. The cerebellar activities are not under voluntary control. The cerebellum controls and coordinates the movement of various group of muscles, ensuring smooth, even precise action. It coordinates activities associated with the maintenance of posture, balance, and equilibrium. Diencephalon. This is third part of the brain. This part of the brain connects cerebrum and the midbrain. It consists of several structures such as thalamus, hypothalamus, pineal gland, and optic chiasma. Thalamus consists of two masses of gray and white matter situated within the cerebral hemisphere, just below corpus callosum, one on each side of the ventricle. And hypothalamus is a small but important structure which weigh around 7 grams and consists of a number of nuclei. It is situated below and in front of the thalamus, immediately above the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus controls many body activities and is one of the major regulator of the homeostasis in our body. It controls and regulates the activities of autonomic nervous system. Here you can understand with this picture that this is thalamus and this is hypothalamus and this is space for pituitary. Brain stem. A brain stem consists of midbrain, pons, medulla and reticular formation. This is midbrain, this is pons, this is medulla and this is reticular formation. It is deep in the inner part of these structures. The midbrain is the area of the brain situated around the cerebral aqueduct between the cerebrum and the pons. It consists of nuclei as well as nerve fibers which connects cerebrum with the lower parts of the brain and with spinal cord. The interior part of the midbrain contains paired bundles of axons known as cerebral peduncles. Pons. The pons is situated in front of the cerebellum, below the midbrain and above medulla oblongata. It consists of many nerve fibers that form a bridge between the two hemispheres of the cerebellum and the fibers passing between higher level of brain, that is cerebrum, to the spinal cord and back. The anatomical structure of pons differ from the cerebrum because here in the pons the white matter is in the periphery and grey matter is in the deep. Medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata extends from pons above and continue with the spinal cord below. It is about 2.5 centimeter long and lie just within the cranium above foramen magnum. It acts as a relay station for sensory nerves going towards the cerebrum. The medulla contains autonomic nerve centers such as cardiac center, respiratory center, vasomotor center, and the coughing, sneezing, and vomiting center. The medulla is also site of decussation of nerve fibers. What is decussation? Decussation means crossing of the fibers from left to right and right to left. Reticular formation. The reticular formation is a collection of neurons in the core of the brainstem. It is surrounded by neural pathways that conduct ascending and descending nerve fibers between the brain and spinal cord. The reticular formation is involved in the coordination of the skeletal muscle activity associated with voluntary motor movement and maintenance of balance. Now, ventricles of the brain. The brain ventricles are four irregular shaped hollow cavities containing cerebrospinal fluid. These are four in number: right and left lateral ventricles, third ventricle, and fourth ventricle. Right and left ventricle, lateral ventricle. These cavities lies within the cerebral hemispheres, one on each side of the median line just below corpus callosum. They are separated from each other by a thin membrane known as septum lucidum and are lined with ciliated epithelium. The third ventricle is a narrow cavity along the midline superior to the hypothalamus and between right and left halves of the thalamus. It communicates with the fourth ventricle by a canal known as cerebral aqueduct. Fourth ventricle. Fourth ventricle is a diamond-shaped cavity situated below and behind the third ventricle between cerebellum and pons. It is continuous with the central canal of spinal cord and communicate with subarachnoid space by foramina on its roof. Cerebrospinal fluid enters the subarachnoid space through these openings. Here you can understand these are the lateral ventricles, third ventricle and fourth ventricle. And this is cerebral central canal in the spinal cord which is continuous with the spinal cord. What is CSF? Cerebrospinal fluid is secreted into each ventricle of the brain by choroid plexus. These are vascular areas where there is a proliferation of blood vessels surrounded by ependymal cells in the lining of ventricle wall. CSF passes back into the blood through tiny diverticula of arachnoid matter called arachnoid villi, which project into the venous sinuses. CSF is secreted continuously at a rate of about 0.5 ml per minute, means 720 ml per day, but the volume remains fairly constant at about 150 ml around the brain and spinal cord as the absorption keep pace with the secretion, means the absorption and secretion continuously takes place at same rate. CSF pressure may be measured using a vertical tube attached to a lumbar puncture needle inserted into the subarachnoid space above the fourth lumbar vertebra and below third lumbar vertebra. Normal CSF pressure is 10 to 30 mm of water. What are the functions of CSF? One is mechanical protection. The CSF serves as shock absorbing medium that protects the delicate structure of brain and spinal cord from the jolts that would otherwise cause them injury to hit the bony walls of the cranial cavity and vertebral canal. So it protects physical injuries to the brain and spinal cord. Second is chemical protection. The CSF provide optimal chemical environment for accurate neuronal signaling. Even slight change in the ionic composition of the CSF within the brain can seriously disrupt the production of action potential and postsynaptic potential and the transfer of nerve impulses. Third is continuous circulation and providing nutrition to the brain. CSF continuously circulate and allow exchange of nutrients and waste products between blood and the nervous tissue. Now we come to cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are part of peripheral nervous system, but they arise from the brain and its parts, so we study them here. The human body contains 12 pairs of cranial nerves that emerges from the brain and supply various structures, most of which are associated with head and neck. Their name generally suggests their distribution and function. They are numbered using Roman numerals. According to their order, they connect with the brain starting from anterior. First is olfactory nerve. So two olfactory nerves are there. These are sensory nerves. These nerves are for sense of smell. Their sensory receptors and fibers originate in the upper part of the mucous membrane of nasal cavity and then goes to the brain. Second are optic nerves. These are also sensory. They are the nerve of sense of sight or vision. The fibers originate in the retina of the eye and they combine to form optic nerve and then reaches this sensation to the brain. Third is oculomotor. This is motor nerve. This nerve arises from the nuclei near the cerebral aqueduct. They supply the four extrinsic muscles of the eye which are used for the movement of eyes. Fourth one is trochlear nerve, which is also a motor nerve. These nerves also arise from the nuclei near the cerebral aqueduct and they supply the superior oblique muscle of the eye, which is also used for movement of the eyeball. Fifth one is trigeminal nerve, which is a mixed nerve, means it will contain both sensory as well as motor fibers. These nerves contain motor and sensory fibers and are among the largest of the cranial nerves. They are the main sensory nerve from the face and head and receive impulse of pain, temperature and touch. The motor fibers stimulate the muscles of mastication. It has three branches, the ophthalmic nerve, maxillary nerve and the mandibular nerve. Now abducent nerve. This is sixth nerve and this is motor nerve. So these nerves arise from the nuclear laying under the floor of fourth ventricle and they supply the lateral rectus muscle of the eye. Seventh is facial nerve, which is also mixed nerve. These nerves are composed of both motor and sensory nerve fibers. The motor fibers supply to the muscles of facial expression and sensory fiber convey impulse from the taste buds of the tongue for the sense of taste. Eighth is vestibulocochlear nerve. So vestibulocochlear nerve is composed of two divisions, vestibular nerve and cochlear nerve. This is both are sensory. The vestibular nerve arises from the semicircular canals of the inner ear and are associated with the maintenance of posture and balance. The cochlear nerve division originate in the spiral organ, that is organ of Corti in the inner ear and convey impulses of hearing. Ninth is glossopharyngeal nerve, which is a mixed nerve. The motor fiber arises from the nuclei of in the medulla oblongata and stimulate the muscles of tongue and pharynx and secretory cells of the parotid gland. The sensory fiber convey impulse from posterior third of the tongue, tonsils, pharynx and from taste buds of the tongue. These nerves are essential for swallowing and gag reflexes. 10th is vagus nerve. This is a mixed nerve. This is the longest cranial nerve. They pass down through the neck into the thorax and abdomen. These nerves form the important part of parasympathetic nervous system, that is part of autonomic nervous system. The motor fibers arise from the nuclei in the medulla and supply the smooth muscles and secretory glands of the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, heart, carotid bodies, esophagus, stomach, intestine, pancreas, gallbladder, bile ducts, spleen, kidney, ureter, blood vessels in the thoracic and abdominal cavity, and sensory fiber. They also convey impulse from the membrane lining of the same structures which we have just discussed to the brain. So this is the largest cranial nerve or longest. Next is accessory nerve. This is a motor nerve. These nerves arise from the nuclei in the medulla oblongata and supply sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscle. Sternocleidomastoid is here and trapezius in the back for their movement. And hypoglossal nerve, this is also a motor nerve. These nerves arise from the nuclei in the medulla oblongata. They supply the muscles of tongue and muscles surrounding the hyoid bone and contribute to the swallowing and speech. Dear students, this is all about brain and cranial nerves. In next class, we will discuss about spinal cord and spinal nerves. So for watching these videos, just subscribe to my channel, My Student Support System. You can like Facebook page of My Student Support System. For making your notes, visit my blogger mynursingstudents.blogspot.com and follow me on Twitter, Instagram and join Facebook group Nursing Notes. Thank you. Have a nice day.